What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy. Thanks for checking in with me. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. I'd love to hear your comments on this great gun. And speaking of great gun, I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about the HK VP9. I know this isn't the first video out there on the VP9, but I think it's a phenomenal gun, and I was really looking forward to doing this review. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about not only the layout of the gun, what's similar to other guns, what might be a little bit different from other guns in its class. So what I mean by that is polymer striker fired handguns. Of course, we'll take a look at some shooting along the way and give you my overall impressions, my opinion of this great gun. So where do we start with this gun? Of course, it is unloaded. So in terms of dimensions with the VP9, I would classify a little bit more as a full-size handgun versus maybe a compact handgun like the Glock 19 or the Sig Sauer P320. This is just a slightly larger frame, a little bit bigger all the way around. This is going to be a little bit closer to maybe a Glock 17, not quite as big, but almost dimensionally as big, or even a Smith & Wesson full-size. And I'll show you a little bit of comparison in size with the Glock 19 as well as the Smith & Wesson full size. I did get both of those out as part of the review. But in terms of specs, the length on the VP9 is 7.34 inches. The height of the VP9 is 5.41 inches. From a width standpoint, at its widest width is 1.32 inches. The overall barrel length is 4.09 inches. Now the gun weighs 25.56 ounces empty. So when you load it down, you're going to be about 6 to 7 ounces heavier than that. So we're looking 32, 33 ounces fully loaded. So it's got a little bit of heft to it. But it's a very well balanced gun, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, especially when I talk about shootability of the gun. From a magazine capacity, the magazine capacity is 15 rounds. Now, I will tell you it's a source of contention from what I've seen in other reviews and in other articles. A lot of people say that if the VP9 is going to be touted really as a full-size firearm, people were disappointed that it only came with 15-round magazines versus 17 or 18, whatever. I feel like 15 rounds is plenty. That's just my opinion. I know more rounds is better. I'm not saying I disagree with that, but depending on what its purpose is, for me, 15 rounds in a magazine is just fine. And this particular firearm, this VP9 or version of it, came with 3 magazines. So that's 3 times 15. That's pretty good. Now, this is not a carry gun for me. So once again, 15 rounds, not a big deal to me. Others might say, you want more rounds, the more the better. Again, I totally get that. I totally understand. For my purposes, 15 rounds is just fine, and getting 3 magazines out of the box is fantastic. And I'll talk a little bit more about value here in just a moment. But again, 3, and these are steel magazines, very good construction, very good quality. They're pretty pricey. You're going to be able to find these somewhere in the $40 to $50 range. If you can find it under that, snatch them up. If you've got the VP9, I believe the VP9 magazine will also fit in a P30 magazine or a P30L magazine. Throw a comment at me if I'm wrong on that. I believe they do. I've had a P30 in the past. When I had a VP9, and I'm pretty darn sure that these were interchangeable. So it's been a while. I can't 100% recall, but I'm pretty sure that they do. In terms of value for the gun, and I'll also talk a little bit more about some of the specs and some of the unique features of this particular VP9, because they have different variants and different models. You're going to find variants that are all black and have just standard steel sights on them. Then you might also find black, and you'll find, and these don't have them. I'll show you these sights here in a moment. But a lot of HKs have the glow in the dark. They phosphoresce. So they're great during the day or on the range, and if they're charged up, and what I mean by that is if they're held under light for a certain amount of time, they will glow for a short while. I don't have a lot of experience with that. A P30 I had did have those sights, and I only used it at the range. So again, from a daylight or a range light standpoint, they were fantastic. From a night standpoint or dusk or anything, I probably not so much, especially if you're concealed carrying. Obviously, the sights aren't going to be able to charge. Now, when I got this particular gun, and this is a relatively new gun in the collection, there were a couple things that drove me to it. You'll notice the frame, they call this their FDE, or flat dark earth color. Now, I will tell you, when you compare it to some other flat dark earths, like maybe the SIG P320, and check out my review on that. It's a full frame flat dark earth. This one is, I would say it's more OD green. I made a joke in a Glocks suck video that I did, posing a question, not saying that Glocks do suck, but I really called this a Gerber baby food green, because it really does kind of look like pea green a little bit more. But again, they tout it as FDE, and that's fine. I still think it's kind of unique looking. It's not just black, and I'm kind of tired of all black guns, so it's nice to have some variety. So as far as the sights go, I lucked out on this, and the frame was enough to get me interested. The sights were enough to get me to buy this right away without hesitation. These are TrueGlow TFX Pros on it. These have the fiber optic and the tritium inserts, so they do glow at night. And they also have a white outline or a white housing on the front sight. So these sights, and hopefully you can see that okay, these sights are amazing to pick up at the range. They really are fantastic. So from an overall value standpoint, I was able to pick up a kind of a cool looking gun, a little bit unique because it's not all black. It's got the different color frame on it, as well as the upgraded sights, and I would consider these sort of the second tier upgrade, because it's not the glow in the dark or phosphorus sights, but these are truly night sights and fiber optic to boot. I got this for, I think after tax, a little under $800. Now that's a little pricey, and this is one of the more expensive guns I have currently in the project. But I think from an overall value standpoint and all that you get with it, 3 magazines, the really good sights, the unique looking frame, I was okay with that. I really was. I think it's good enough value. And so beyond the specs and some of that, there were a couple of other things that really drove me to this. Now, this is not my first VP9. I did have another one, an all black one. It did have night sights, but it was used, and it was pretty used. Now it shot very well, and it was a fine gun. It wasn't the right gun at the right time. I found a deal on something else that I wanted, and VP9s are really popular, so they don't sit around for very long. So I sold that one and kind of moved on. Well, I've come full circle, and this one's not going anywhere. Another part of the value of this gun is the ergonomics. I really like the grip texture on this gun. It's got these I would say semi-aggressive little squigglies that go all the way around the firearm, front strap, the back strap, as well as the sides. Which give me just enough positive grip that I don't really feel like it needs any sort of aid, like Talon grips or any stippling or anything like that. It's just fine for me from a grip standpoint. And then from an ergonomic standpoint, you'll notice the shape of this grip is contoured, and I've kind of your average large size hands. They're not terribly large, but they're not medium. I wear a large glove pretty much all the time. So this fits my hand really, really well. I'm able to wrap my hand all the way around the gun without any sort of a problem. I can certainly, I've got plenty of trigger reach. And it's very comfortable for me. However, one of the nice things, and yes, I disappeared off camera for a moment, and I had almost forgotten to bring out the back straps and the side straps. a unique component for a lot of the polymer HKs, including the P30, P30SK, and the VP9, are you can change out the back straps. So if you wanted to reduce the hump back there, you certainly could. Or if you thought, you know, hey, what the heck, let's have a little bit more, you definitely can. The medium back strap is on there right now, but it does come with a small and a large. But then when you take the back strap off, you can actually remove the side plates as well. If for some reason you felt like, and these are medium side plates, if you felt like that was a little bit too much, you could go with your small side plates right here, or you could go with your large side plates to give you a little bit more beef in the hand. So you really can customize this. I can't remember what the total amount of customizations are with this, but you really can completely customize it, because you don't have to have the medium on both sides. Maybe depending on how you hold it, maybe you like a little bit more grip on this side. You could put the large in, you could put the small on this side, and put any one of the back straps on. So you can mix and match to your liking. So it really is a very customizable grip. Another reason why I'm very attracted to the VP9, as well as the other HK polymers. I do like all of them. I think they're very, very ergonomic. Some other interesting features about the VP9, of course, it does have an accessory rail on it, and it's a pretty good size 4-channel accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, things like that. Of course, it does have your slide release lever and takedown lever. And then the last thing, and this is something that is a little bit more unusual for the VP9 and some of the other German and possibly some other European firearms as well. The mag release on this, and by the way, it is ambidextrous, as is the slide release notch here, which is really nice. This gun is fully ambidextrous. The magazine release is part of the trigger guard here. So to activate or release the magazine, and it is a positive release, which is really nice, you have to push down on the paddles on either side of the frame here. Now, for me, and yes, I'm used to the American style magazine release that's right here as part of the grip. I've gotten very used to with my index finger, because if I'm releasing a magazine, I'm clearly not going to be shooting at the time. My index finger is what I use to release the magazine, and I find that to work very, very well. I haven't had to put a lot of thought into retraining myself very much. I mean, a little bit. It's another reason why I wouldn't actually carry this gun, because I'm so used to the American style. But I've gotten used to it, and so releasing the magazine has maybe not become second nature, but not far from it. It certainly hasn't been a problem or a detraction or detractor for me for the gun. So kind of neat and kind of an interesting learning experience, if nothing else. And now this gun does not have any sort of an external safety, although there are some that do. There is actually a little notch right here that is filled in with polymer, but it can be, you can get the VP9 with the safety on it if you want. One other kind of unique and unusual feature about the VP9 is, and hopefully you can see, hopefully I'm angling that okay. There are these little polymer ears right here, so it gives it kind of, well, they really look like ears. So it looks like you're looking at the back of a head with ears on it. These polymer ears will assist in racking the slide. And at first, when I first saw the VP9 when it first came out, whatever it was, I think it might have been 2 years ago, or maybe longer. I thought this to be very gimmicky, and I thought it looked very silly. Now the nice thing is, if you take the rear side off, you can actually remove these, so you're not stuck with them. You don't have to live with them forever. But I find that although they look a little bit unusual, they really are fantastic. I really like that they assist in racking the slide, whether it's overhand or you're just pulling back the slide, or maybe you're just wanting to make it clear, whatever. I really like them quite a bit. So these will definitely be staying on. They don't bother me, and although they may make the gun a tiny bit wider, that's okay with me. It doesn't really bother me. It does have nice aggressive serrations both on the front and the back of the slide. So if you're into doing press checks or anything like that, this gun is definitely built to do so. It's very easy to do. Another thing, the guide rod is not terribly firm, which is really nice. It's firm enough, of course, to cycle the slide and do all the things that it needs to do, but not so much to where you're really having to muscle it to rack the slide or lock it open or anything like that. And I think that goes to the quality of the overall construction of the firearm. I think it's a very good quality firearm. So let's take a look real quickly at the inside of the firearm. Again, it is clear, of course. And to do this, it's very similar to a lot of the other polymer striker-fired firearms out there. We've got our takedown lever, and we just put that down. And we do have to pull the trigger on this, or at least I just did. I'm pretty sure you do have to pull the trigger for this all the time. I'll have to look that up and correct myself a little bit later on if that's not the case. But and it might be because this is very, very new, so it hasn't been broken in just yet. But once you get the frame and the slide apart, you do have your guide rod, and it is a steel guide rod and a flat recoil spring, which aids in reducing the amount of recoil for the gun, which is great. And then, of course, your barrel and your slide. And now the internals of the slide, to me, look a little bit more complicated. There's a little bit more going on here than what I'm used to with maybe Glocks or Smith & Wessons. So I imagine a lot of that has to do with, again, reducing recoil, but also instead of having a firing pin plunger, I believe the mechanism in here serves the same type of purpose to make it safe, drop safe, or anything like that. So if you drop the gun, it's not just going to go off. Again, I'm not as versed with the internals of this, but that would be my guess there. All right, to put the gun back together, just take your slide and your barrel, put the barrel back in and make sure that it is seated properly. And then get your guide rod back in. Make sure that it's flat against the barrel lug. And then just slide it back on. This is always a challenge to do behind the camera. And then put your takedown lever back up. Close your slide and we'll check for functionality. So before I stack this up against a couple of the other guns that I have out right now, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the trigger of this. This is kind of your standard, I'm not going to call it a Glock safe action. I think HK would probably frown on that because I think safe action's probably copyrighted or whatever. But it does have the safety dingus here in the middle of the trigger, and when you depress that, a lever goes up in the rest of the trigger housing. Of course, that allows you then to be able to depress the trigger. Otherwise, I'm not going to press it. I'm actually pressing against the side of the trigger. It will not go any further. So once you do that, once you depress that and start pulling the trigger, it's a smooth uptake. And I know it looks like it's getting caught on something. It's just it happens to be the way I'm kind of holding this right now. But it is very smooth. And it has a very defined wall on it. Notice it doesn't have to go all the way back to the very back of the trigger housing. And a very nice audible break. And then our reset. And a break. And the reset is just right ahead of the break. There is a little bit of air, a little bit of uptake to get back to the wall again. But it's a very, very smooth trigger. I think HK puts this right around the 5 pound or just under 5 pound, and I would say that's a pretty accurate description for this. Now I tend to not shoot with the pad of my finger. I do wrap my finger a little bit. I'm just used to doing it that way. It's more comfortable for me, and I'm actually a little bit more accurate with that. Otherwise, I tend to push left a little bit. So when I bring my finger all the way around, again, to me it's a very smooth uptake, and our break and our reset, and it's ready to go again. Absolutely fantastic trigger. Really love it quite a bit. If I was to compare it to the P320, which also has a fantastic trigger, I would say they're very similar. The P320 is a little bit more spongy. This one actually has a cleaner break on it. Now, if you compare it to maybe a Walther PPQ, I'd say the PPQ probably has a little bit of an edge on this. I had an opportunity to shoot one the other day, and it has a fantastic trigger, as as many people have said, but this is not far from it. It's really it's a quality trigger. So size-wise, how does this stack up to maybe a Glock 19? I wish I had a 17, which is of course the full-size Glock. But all I have in my collection is the 19 and then the 34, and of course the 34 would be a little bit of a giant compared to the VP9. But overall, the 19 is smaller in stature all the way around. From a length standpoint, it's not quite a half an inch shorter, but it certainly is shorter, and it's significantly shorter in height. I'd say it's 3/4, almost an inch shorter in height. So Glock certainly touts to be, or Glock 19 touts to be a compact gun. It definitely is. Versus the VP9, I would consider it more full size. And then a width standpoint, of course, the VP9 having those ears on them, but the Glock 19 is going to be under 1.2 inches wide. So we're talking between 1 and 2/10 of an inch wider on the VP9. And then Smith & Wesson, this is a full size. This is the M&P VTAC. It's still a good looking gun. I like this gun quite a bit. So actually, I'm going to put the VP9 behind it, or the VTAC behind it. The VTAC is just a tiny bit bigger. Now the VTAC cheats. It's got a little bit more of a beaver tail on the back to assist in gripping and reduce any slide bite. But these are very close. If we're omitting the beaver tail, these are just about equal to each other. Certainly in length and almost in height. The VTAC's got it by maybe 1/10 or 2/10 of an inch, but they are very, very similar. From a width standpoint, they're also very similar. Of course, the VP9, again, with these ears on them, does give it a little bit more width, but otherwise they are very, very similar. These, from a frame standpoint, are almost identical. By the way, do check out my Glock 19 and my Smith & Wesson full-size reviews out there. I could tell that the M&P full-size is not quite as popular as it used to be. I'm not getting as many hits on that as I am on really any of my other videos right now. But it is a great gun, as all of these are, of course. So enough about this. Let's take a look at some range footage and see how the VP9 does. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. Like I said, the VP9 is a fantastic gun. It's a great shooter. You can shoot it all day long, and it's very pleasurable to shoot. Now, one thing of note, since we're talking about shooting, and other reviewers and other folks have complained about the same thing that I'm going to give a little bit of a gripe on too. It's one of the few things that's a little bit of let's say a notch down for this. If you notice in the trigger housing, and it's pretty beefy trigger housing to accommodate for the mag release paddles, there actually is a divot that goes down underneath the trigger. And again, I'm sorry if you can't really see that very well. I mean, grab a pointer here. There's a notch or a divot right under the trigger where the trigger travels as it's going backwards. And what happens, and you probably can't see it, it's almost healed now, but there's a little bit of a dot right there. After about 200 or 300 rounds through this, if you're not careful, and I have a tendency to start to lower my finger as I shoot and kind of rub the bottom, and I get irritated by a lot of guns because I do that. I know it's a bad habit of mine. It's how I naturally shoot. My finger and a lot of other fingers of reviewers tend to rub the bottom, so it catches kind of at the bottom of the trigger and the very top of the trigger housing, and a couple things can happen. You can rub your skin and eventually get a blister or a mark right there. That'll go away, of course, over time. But some other shooters have complained that they get a little bit of the trigger house shock, I guess, when they shoot, and the recoil happens. The housing, the trigger housing, kind of bats their finger a little bit. I haven't noticed that so much, but I do notice the rubbing on the bottom of the trigger, and so I think that would probably take some more rounds, a little bit more training with this gun to be able to avoid that, keep my finger a little bit higher on the trigger, then it probably won't be as much of a problem. I will say I'm willing to sacrifice that discomfort a little bit because of how much I like this gun and how good the ergonomics are and the trigger and everything else about the gun. I don't put 1,000 rounds a day through any gun. I wish I could. That'd be pretty sweet, but I can't from a cost standpoint and a time standpoint. So a couple 200-300 rounds, maybe 400 in a day, and that's on a darn good day. It's probably my birthday at that point in time. I'm okay with that little sacrifice because I think this is a good enough gun. So again, a lot of fun to shoot at the range. It's well worth the few extra dollars. So I still consider a lot of value in this. In my Do Glocks Suck video, I touted a lot on value and price. Yeah, again, I said this is a more expensive firearm than either the Glock or the Smith & Wesson or the SIG P320 or a lot of the other guns out there right now in the polymer striker fired class. But with this particular one, a lot of options. Again, 3 magazines, upgraded sights, the HK quality. They make a fantastic firearm, great ergonomics, rail, all those things. It's a good enough package. Didn't have to spend any more money than that, which you often have to do on other guns to get them up to that standard, if you want to do that, of course. And again, not saying that any of the other guns are bad or not good value or anything like that. I find this one to be a good value, even spending a couple more dollars. The VP9 has been out long enough now that it's got a lot of good aftermarket support. There are a lot of holster options, sight options. There are probably some aftermarket trigger kits if this particular trigger doesn't suit your needs. I haven't looked for that, but I imagine there probably are. I know the P30 has other trigger options, so surely this one does as well. So the aftermarket support is pretty prevalent for the VP9 because it is such a popular firearm. Mags are plentiful, although again a little bit expensive, but they're definitely plentiful out there. So is the gun carry worthy? Yeah, it's definitely carry worthy. If you don't mind a full frame or full size firearm, I mean, if you carry a Glock 19 or something like that, or a P320 or whatever, you could surely carry this. It's just barely bigger, and it doesn't weigh a lot more, maybe an ounce more than a lot of those other guns. Now, of course, the Glock being a little bit of an exception, a Glock is an exceptionally light firearm, which is why so many people carry it. But this is certainly carryable, especially if you do outside the waistband. But even inside the waistband, it definitely is doable. So final thoughts on this. I love the VP9. It's a great platform. It's been a lot of fun to shoot, and this is definitely a keeper. If you can find one, I definitely recommend that you pick it up. I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. So YouTube, thank you again for checking in. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And this is KS Gun Guys saying I'll see you later. Thanks.